Hey everyone, this is Carrie Magro here, and I'm autistic and have dysgraphia, and today an award-winning public speaker, best-selling author, and autistic self-advocate. I'm really happy to be here today with somebody very near and dear to me, my mom. I am now a 32-year-old on the autism spectrum, and one of the most common questions I receive is, what did my mom do to help me most? So I'm hoping by sharing a little bit of her perspective with all of you tonight, you'll get to understand a little bit more from my mom's point of view about my journey growing up on the autism spectrum. So we're calling tonight's presentation 28 Years of Autism, a Mother and Son's Perspective. How are you doing today, Suzanne?
I'm doing well, Carrie. Nice to see you.
Good seeing you too. So thank you all so much for submitting questions beforehand. So I'm going to go to one question that somebody posted right away. And this question comes from a single mom. And she writes, I'm a single mom of a newly verbal autistic child. He falls very quickly, and due to COVID-19, we were able to go anywhere, and that includes me working. My question is there anything you are able to do or send some resources my way? Is there anything in particular that you've heard that's helped people during COVID-19, especially for people with autism?
Are you asking me that question?
I am, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody's struggling. It's just, first of all, like the normal activities our routine is so just turned upside down, and it's so hard to keep everybody in the house and to not have places to go to and not have really disruptive routine. I guess you've probably looked into this, Carrie, more than I have in terms of what are your viewers telling you has been helping them with their children?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing for me is I've noticed that a lot of autism organizations like the Autism Society of America have been there to help, have been actually doing an autism Facebook Live program for the past couple of months, bringing in leading experts in the field to discuss their journeys as well, which has been really helpful for the most part from what I've seen. So that's definitely a resource I would recommend. And also just, keep making sure that they're having a healthy daily schedule, make sure that they're having a routine, because routine is really important right now, especially because everyone's routine has been changed dramatically during this time. So that's something I highly recommend, at least for right now. So another question came in, which I would love to ask you, Mom. And the question is, what is your advice to moms with recently diagnosed children on the spectrum? Any words of wisdom?
I think I'm hearing an echo now too. Is there something I can do to get rid of the echo?
It's okay. It's quite all right.
Okay, so I guess that period when the child is just newly diagnosed is really very difficult, because you probably thought there was something going on, and you wanted to find out what was going on. But when you first find out that, when you first get a label to it, it's pretty overwhelming. So now you have a label, you have an idea of what's wrong, but it doesn't really help you figure out what you have to do in your day to day. So nothing really changes in some respects. And that's a hard thing. It's not like, you have a fever and you can take Tylenol, and it's not like you have an infection and you can take antibiotics. This is something that you have to live with every day. However, I think once you have a diagnosis, it does give you some clarity, and it does help you center down. You say, oh, okay, now I know what it is. So now what are we going to do about it? And what Kerry mentioned is there's so many organizations out there now that have like go-to and guides on what to do when you're newly diagnosed, on what you should really be doing. I think you have a lot more help certainly than I did when Carrie was diagnosed. Carrie, you want to chime in on some of those starter kits on the first 100 days and different things that people have put out to really help you cope with what's going on?
Yeah. And I know a few comments came in about the echo. I'm so sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on. But definitely one recommendation I have is to go to autismspeaks.org/toolkits. They have a 100-day toolkit, which is absolutely free to purchase, which actually helps people understand a little bit more about what they should expect within those first 100 days somebody is diagnosed with autism. So I definitely recommend that first and foremost, check that out. But then also Autism Speaks also has a family response team, which is really great, where if you just email family services at autismspeaks.org, you can learn a little bit more about some amazing resources for people who get it. That resource group has teachers, they have parents who have children on the autism spectrum that are part of that. So definitely family services at autismspeaks.org would be a great recommendation that I would have for you. So somebody wrote, you should stop and start because there's a lot of feedback and we can't hear you. So I apologize for that. I'm not really sure why that's happening. Oh, have mom mute and that may help. And then when he speaks, unmute. Hope that helps. Hey, Mom, can you just mute yourself really quickly? We're going to try that. Does everyone hear me okay? Does everyone hear me a little bit better? If you guys hear me better, just write in the comments that you hear me better, and that would be amazing. So Kayla writes in and she says, what was the starter kit toolkit called? So it's called the everyone is saying much better. Great. Awesome. So the toolkit is called the 100-day toolkit, and it's available to check out at autismspeaks.org/toolkits. So I would definitely recommend giving that a look. So the next question I have for you, Mom, and you'll be able to, what we'll do is I'll mute after I'm done with my question, and then you can unmute yourself. So one of the questions came in from an autism mom, and she writes, how did your mom handle you when you had temper tantrums and difficulty calming back down? So for everyone listening in, one of my greatest challenges growing up on the autism spectrum was sensory challenges. So Mom, what do you think were some of the things that helped me the most in those areas?
Well, part of it is that when Carrie used to have meltdowns, it's like it would start and it wouldn't stop. I mean, it would escalate very quickly. And so there wasn't a lot of time. I mean, when he was littler, I would try to hold him, but he was bigger than me in many ways. So he would kick and scream. And so to some degree, I would just let him, if I knew he was in a safe place, I would just let him basically accelerate, and then he would basically tire himself out. But you have to be careful with that because you have to make sure that they're not going to be in a situation where they're going to hurt themselves by bumping into something or actually pushing into something or something like that. I got to a point where I really used to just try to let him center himself. I mean, I could see that he would escalate and cry and kick and jump up and down and things like that. But he would, if you tried to, talk to him definitely and try to calm him down, tell him everything's okay, not to be worried, not to be upset. But he would calm himself down because, they escalate and then they twirl and things like that. But eventually they will calm themselves down because they'll just tire themselves out. It really is, you have to be reassuring to them, but I don't think it's a situation where you can really hold them and calm them down by holding them. I don't think that really works. It might be if you had some pillows on the floor, or a soft cushion, perhaps they can, perhaps you could get on the floor with them and try to like just stay with them until they, till they right themselves. That would be useful too, I believe.
Very, very well said. Yeah, no, I think my mom hit that right on the head. So for everyone watching at home, feel free to, if you have any specific questions you have for my mom, this is her first Facebook Live on her Facebook page. So definitely write your comment for any challenge that you might specifically have, regardless of your parent, self-advocate, teacher, etc., and so forth. And again, one of the cool things that we do via our video series is that my Facebook page, Carrie's Autism Journey, is actually a nonprofit organization where I provide scholarships for students with autism go to college. And I do a self-advocate video series where we highlight people impacted by a diagnosis. And with end of the year giving, we would love your support. If you could do anything at all to support our initiatives, that would be really greatly appreciated. And we have another question that just came in. Hi, Naomi. I hope you're having a great night so far. Naomi writes, holding doesn't with my daughter either. I have to get her on her level and throw a fit party with her until she laughs at me being ridiculous, and then it calms down by her laughter. That's very, very interesting. More of a comment than a question, but thank you so much, Naomi, for sharing that with us. So Katie writes, I love to learn what to expect in the future, teenage years. So Mom, do you want to talk a little bit about just some of my early challenges transitioning through puberty?
Sure. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the question, whether it was tied to the meltdowns or whether it's just a question of what it was like for teenage years. Weren't much different than the early years in terms of the transitions are still, I mean, we used to drive to school, and if there was a road closed, then we had to go a different way. It was very disconcerting to have to, it was amazing, that he would have like almost like a physical reaction to a change in routine, and it wasn't something that he was even conscious of. It would just happen. So you have to try to, just as the parent just said, you have to try to negotiate, and also just try to divert the kids from thinking about what's happening, try to get them to talk about something else so that they won't notice that they're going a different way. The teenage years are teenage years. I mean, we're dealing with a young boy right now who was just diagnosed with autism, and he's 15 or 16 now, and his mother's just texting us constantly saying she can't tell whether it's just being a teenager, and a lot of that is, it's just a lot of behaviors are just that period of time when they get quiet. You don't know why they're quiet. They don't want to talk to you about things. They don't want to share. And that basically is being a teenager. That's not really anything just from a symptom of the autism. But I find that autistic children, their traits and their issues of like being quiet and wanting to withdraw, that's very similar to being a teenager. So I think you'll be able to deal with them either having the autism, or you'll be able to deal with them going through being a teenager.
That was very, very well said. So everyone at home, puberty was also interesting for me because I was a little bit overweight. I had a lot of picky eating challenges during most of my adolescence, but once I started eating, you couldn't get me to stop eating. I was 230 pounds when I was just about 15 years old in my freshman year of high school. And I found a lot of motivation based on my key interests. That was actually something that helped me tremendously during puberty, and really just sticking to it. I love basketball. I love music. And I wanted to get out for the basketball team, so I lost 60 pounds almost in a summer just so I could play basketball. So find your kids' motivations from a very, very early age, because regardless of where they are on the spectrum, it can really, really help them excel. So we have a lot of great questions coming in. Thank you all so much. So one of the questions that came in is from Liliana. Hi, Liliana. Your question is discussing biggest challenge, motivation, and finish any project started, how to help conduct successful outcomes. Mom, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I find that one very very interesting, because it also goes with what we've been discussing with this boy's parents, who's a teenager newly diagnosed. You have to figure out what motivates your child. In Kerry's situation, he liked rewards, but I think you really have to find out, and you know your children very well, so you have to find out what they really motivates them, what they would like, and then you basically have to gear that completion of that project to, okay, if you know, okay, you want to, you want to be on your iPhone, or you want to, you want to do this with your friend, and you can't do much with your friends right now, but you have to try to say, well, you're going to be able to do this if you complete your project, and just try to motivate them into that, that they, if they want a reward, and it is a reward in some sense, if they want a successful outcome, if they want what they want, then they have to complete the work that they've started. And I found that with Kerry, we kind of did bribe him a little bit, or quote unquote reward him a little bit. And then I found the longer that went on, it just seemed like that need for that support system broke away. That if you get the child to finish their projects, they'll find their own inner strength or their own sense of worth for finishing it, and you won't have to do that on a consistent basis. But it really depends on finding out if your daughter likes fashion angels, if your son, wants a new video game, or he wants to play a video game. There has to be some sort of reward in the beginning to motivate them to complete something positive. Not, I'm going to take away this, or I'm going to take away that if you don't complete your project. But try to motivate them into a win-win situation where they need to complete their project, and it will become a win-win situation, and you'll motivate them in some manner.
I think that hits the nail right on the head. I mean, and it's going to look different depending on who you have on the spectrum, depending if they're high support needs, low support needs. But one of the biggest things is you're definitely going to want to slow down reward systems as they get older, because one of the biggest things is self-motivation when they form their own independence as they get a little bit older. So use those reward systems when they're very, very young, early intervention, obviously, but as they get older, definitely trickle it back a little bit, and helping them find their key interests can definitely help with a lot of that self-motivation. We have some more great questions coming in. Thank you all so much. Kristen, I wrote in my books. They can be found at kerrymagro.com/store. We have a question coming in. Oh, this is a great question. Hi, Susie. So Susie writes, what advice do you have for helping a preteen girl on the spectrum who is struggling with making friends? Now, Mom, this one's interesting because I started really having some of my first real friendships right when I was in those tween stages. Well, what would you think would be some things that you would recommend to Susie?
Well, I don't have a girl, so I have to, and I know preteen girls are different than preteen boys, because as you say, Carrie, boys tend to go after sports. So, and sports becomes the leveler where the boys can actually play sports. And I think some of their friendships actually come out of that. Not that girls don't play sports, but I don't really have much to say. Carrie didn't have many friends. He didn't really have friends until he was well into high school, and it was always a challenge for us. We wound up enrolling him in a lot of tutoring, and a lot of, like, he went to tennis camp and he went to basketball camp, and he went to things. I think one of the things is, if you have friends who have girls who are in the same age group, perhaps you can make them, not make them, but develop opportunities where they can socialize together. It really is looking into your group. If they have cousins, cousins are always a great way to, family members, who I find from a lot of people that they say that the cousins actually are very supportive, because they're family members, and people get along with their family members. Usually they don't have that apprehension. So it's so hard to answer this question now, because there's no school and there's no clubs. I would say, take your daughter to, out to, school activities, but we really don't have school activities right now. So it's a very, very challenging time. Carrie, you know a lot of girls on the spectrum. What do you think?
Yeah, so there are a ton of amazing advocates on the spectrum who are women today. Amy Griffino is one that I would highly recommend researching a little bit more, because she talks a lot about her teenage years, along with independence, relationships, sexuality. But for me, I think one of the things is also making more awareness for girl autism in general. Boys are diagnosed 4 times more often than girls on the autism spectrum. So a lot of the times girls fall through the cracks, not only with misdiagnoses, but also just a lot of not awareness about some of the different traits that girls have versus boys, such as girls on the autism spectrum are more likely to be able to mask different characteristics they have on the autism spectrum, which can sometimes lead to burnout, which can make friendships very, very challenging for those individuals. So it is a case by case. We often say that if you met one person with autism, you met just that one person with autism. But definitely try to spread awareness for girl autism, and definitely check out Amy, because she would be a great resource for you. This is a great question that came in, and it's from Maha. I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, but she writes, how did you choose the right therapy? I know every kid is different, but what did you enjoy most, and what helped you most? So for people out there who are listening in, so I had occupational, physical, and speech were my main therapies. But Mom, I guess the question is, how did you come about those therapies specifically?
Well, I think every autism mother knows there as much as there is not a manual that tells you how to raise your child with autism. Once your child is diagnosed, the protocol is that the child have speech, occupational, physical therapy. And I think looking back, a lot of people will say, well, what is occupational and physical therapy? They understand the need for the speech therapy, because most children have some sort of speech delay or expressive and receptive language delays. But they say, well, why do you need occupational and why do you need physical therapy? And the truth is that autism has the spectrum of things that it involves, and one of them is most children have low gross and fine motor skills, and most children actually benefit from physical and therapy. And most kids, if you're in a public school system, when you do your evaluation, you're evaluated, and most children receive physical, speech, and physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. In Carrie's situation, Carrie had those really right through high school, and there's no doubt that those are the cornerstone of therapies. Now, Carrie's therapies branched out a little bit, because he also, and I don't think music therapy was as popular or as in vogue when Carrie was small, but music therapy certainly helped, and art therapy and theater therapy. So, when Kerry was small, it was, you were trying to get the basic therapies. He was just right before ABA. He didn't have ABA. I know a lot of people use ABA now, but there are a myriad of therapies. And again, you have to look and see what your individual child, responds to. But I haven't seen any IEP out there that doesn't start with the basics of speech, occupational, physical therapy, and then as we talk about other things that actually can help, especially as the child progresses in some of those areas, adding in the therapies such as music, theater, or art therapy can be very useful also.
Very well said. I love this question that came in from Mackenzie. Hey, Mom, if you could just mute your mic just for a quick second. Mackenzie writes, I'm also on the autism spectrum and went through school with an IEP. Do you go through that too? And what was your experience like with that? So I would say one of the biggest questions I receive is about IEPs and how to go about receiving services and seeing that those services are really just looked at really well, especially in K through 12, and just making sure that your child is really reaching their milestones. I received an IEP throughout K through 12. And there were a lot of times when I would actually even sit in on my IEP meetings to learn a little bit more about my own specific accommodations and different challenges that I had within my academics. Mom, what was some of your earliest just like thoughts about sitting in on IEP meetings?
Well, I'm not sure how old the child is, Mackenzie's child is, so I'm not sure, how relevant when children are supposed to start sitting in when they're about 12 years old. And certainly by the time you're in high school, children should be sitting in on their IEPs, even if it's only for a portion of the IEP meeting, because as Kerry said, or he hasn't said yet, but once you, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IEP is in effect from the time you're 3 to 21, but most children lose it when they graduate. It's 3 to 21 or when you get your high school diploma. So most children lose the IEP when they're 18, and then if they are going on to college or post-secondary, then they find out that there is no IEP after high school. Most students at that point in time really can't self-advocate because they don't really know what they need. Because their parents have sat down with the teachers and with the social workers, and they've created the IEP that is supposed to help you get to your educational goals. But most students haven't really any idea or any clue as to what that is. The IEP process is daunting. It takes years, I believe, from the time your child is first diagnosed to really get comfortable with it, because that is really the process that's deciding where your child will be placed and in what program and what services they're going to get. I believe that after you've done it 3 or 4 times, though, you start to realize that the school system should not have all the power, that this is your child, and that the ones that really work, which is where they consider you a partner, because you are a partner on that team. That team is not made up of the school district. It's made up of everybody who is present at the IEP meeting. You can have an advocate become there. You can have anybody you want come there, and then they have to sign the IEP, and that becomes your child's IEP team. And I think you can really work with the IEP team because you're part of it. Once you realize you are part of the team, I believe you'll feel much more comfortable negotiating what you need to get out of it.
Yeah, that was really well said, Mom. And again, it's going to be different depending on, and if you've had the opportunity to have early intervention, especially within the first 3 years, there might have been something your doctors and therapists have already decided in terms of services that you could definitely recommend for preschool, kindergarten, et cetera, and so forth as they continue through their academic journey. So one of the most important things we continue to harp on in the community is that early intervention truly is the key, that you can diagnose a child with autism as early as 18 months. So definitely something to remember as a big topic of conversation. We have a lot of great questions coming in. One question that did come in was, can you include the link to your website if I would like to make a donation? I really appreciate that. So I did post in the comments, in the pinned comments, the two top comments that you'll see. One is to my donation page for end of the year giving. We need your support more than ever. And then the second question that also came in is, will we get to all the questions tonight? Now, there are a lot of great questions coming in. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get to all the questions, but I don't want to leave anyone hanging. So the other way is the second pinned comment, which says, did we miss your question? Write it to me at this link, bit.ly/question for Carrie, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. But we're still getting started, so hopefully we can get to as many questions as possible. So this is a great question, and we don't actually have experience in this area. However, I know this is a topic that comes up quite a bit. The three main therapies that I hear about in the autism community are occupational, speech, and physical. But ABA is very up and coming. There are a lot of parents who are pushing for ABA. I never received ABA, so I can't give you a first-person perspective into ABA. But Mom, just out of curiosity, have you heard from any parents about ABA and just any good, bad stories overall?
Yes, Carrie. I think I have to look this up. This is really an interesting. Carrie was diagnosed in 1992, and he had a host of problems. I mean, he had expressive and he had speech delay, but he also had expressive and receptive language disorder, and which I think most children who at that age would have if they are autistic. I think ABA may not have really been in vogue or around when you were diagnosed, Carrie, because just like a lot of people think Carrie has Asperger's syndrome, and actually Asperger's syndrome was really not a diagnosis in 1992, but it was in 1994. So we didn't have that available to us. I find that ABA is very useful to take a child of, from what I know, to take a child who has absolutely no speech to speech. I've seen that happen many times where a child is making sounds and has sounds, but he or she doesn't really have speech yet. And that's the area where I've heard and I've witnessed that it seems to be the one where Carrie had speech delay and didn't have speech, but he did have sounds. And it just wasn't available to us to try, so we did the trial and error, routine. But there are people who really love ABA, and there are people who hate ABA. A lot of people think that it's they just don't like it. So I mean, I think you've heard that, Carrie. You told me about people who think you should go to floor time or different methods rather than use ABA. But at the same time, I know a myriad of ABA therapists that really work wonderfully with children. I know of a few right now in New Jersey that are around 6 years old and 7 years old, and that constant ABA therapy of 20 hours a week really it's intensive, and I think sometimes that's really what children need. But again, it's based on what you really believe your doctor recommends and your experiences. Carrie, you have a lot of experience with ABA from parents and children. What do you think?
Yeah. So, and Mom, if you could just mute again. You gotta love technology in 2020, just as a side note. But yes, one of the biggest things I hear is that it kind of is the same as my mom just mentioned. For a lot of people with high support needs, they have been able to utilize ABA because it's very structured in nature. It's very one-on-one, which a lot of kids can really excel at who are on the autism spectrum. What I hear a lot from the people with Asperger's in our community, autistic adults who have low support needs, is that they found ABA a little bit too intrusive. They felt that it was a little bit more of a really strict way of just helping with challenges versus something like floor time therapy. I've heard a lot better recommendations, but also I think a lot of the times we look at ABA, and if somebody is doing ABA 2020, it's a lot better than ABA from decades ago when we didn't understand a lot about autism. So obviously, you know your child best. We say often that you are your child's greatest advocate. So definitely give it a try, see if it helps. But if you're seeing triggers, if you're seeing red flags, definitely look at other therapies. There are some on my website, carriemagro.com. You can learn a lot about the therapies that I use to help me growing up on the autism spectrum. So we have some more great questions coming in. Again, everyone, my nonprofit gets the opportunity to do these videos. And with end of the year, if you would like to make a tax-deductible donation to support our interview tonight, support our video series that we continue to do, definitely check out the link in the comments and just give what you can. It doesn't have to be a large gift. It could be very, very small, depending on how many bucks you have to spare. So we really appreciate that. So we have a lot of IEP questions, which I get. The IEP process is very, very challenging at times. But I love this question that came in, because this question came in about 3 or 4 times already. And it is from Tara. Hi, Tara. The question is, how did you talk to your son about being autistic? At what age did Carrie really comprehend what being autistic means? And what does that conversation look like? So, Tara, I'll really just go real quickly and just say, I went up to my parents about why I was special. I always knew I was special since I was a baby, but I didn't know what that meant. So one day I was in a social skills class. I was playing disability celebrity bingo, learning about all these celebrities who have disabilities. And it just got me curious. And that's when I asked my parents. And that's when they told me I had autism when I was about 11 and a half, 12 years old. And it wasn't really that big of it. Like it wasn't anything that I was like, oh my God, I have autism. It was just more like, oh, I really don't know what autism means. But as I got older, I would start researching and learning more. And that's when I became a self-advocate. Mom, is there anything from that conversation that you remember specifically?
Yeah, well, I do remember Kerry has, in the spectrum of autism, he has pervasive development disorder, not otherwise specified. So, you know, I've always thought of him as having, and for many years I said, oh, he's got PDD, NOS. Well, you know, my sister would say, what's that? You know, so the label of autism perhaps wasn't even on my mind that much, because any of the programs Kerry tried to get into, we sent him to a special needs camp during the summer, JCC on the Palisades, Camp Tikva, and they didn't take any children with autism. They were basically for children who had neurological impairments. So I think we stayed away from the word autism because at that point in time, it was limiting to get him into things because of it. And as you know, basically not many children who have IEPs actually are ever classified as autistic. They're classified as having a educational need, which, you know, could be neurological or perceptual and things like that. But when he did have that conversation with us, he was already in a special school. He had moved from a public school into a school for children who had, all of whom had disabilities of some sort. And you know, that's why he was off playing disability bingo in this school. And he came home and he said, well, you know, what do I have? And we said, well, yeah, you have autism. And I remember saying to him, I said, well, you have autism. You certainly aren't artistic, because autistic and artistic are kind of, you know, on the same synonyms to each other in terms of speech. And because Kerry has dysgraphia and he can't hold a pencil. So if you ever saw his art at that age, and even now, it looks like stick figures. So he kind of like looked at me, and he kind of laughed, and he went on. And then over time, as he said, he became more interested in looking it up and finding out what it was about. And certainly when he was in high school, really a prime high school, 16, 17, 18, there were discussions about it, and what it was and how it impacted him. But I think from my point of view, and I'm going through this now with a boy who's a senior, very, very, very bright boy. And the parents have known his diagnosis since he was like 4 or 5 years old. And his parents didn't really tell him until he was like, he actually asked them also when he was in the 7th grade. And he has not really accepted the diagnosis at all. And it's made me wonder if really you just shouldn't tell them the minute, they should always know. Because maybe if they always knew, then it wouldn't come as, it wouldn't upset them so much, or it wouldn't allow them to be, to worry about it. Because I think most kids really have some sort of reaction to. Some people think we have a friend, Carrie has a friend who's 30 now, and his parents told him when he was in, or his parents never really told him. And when he got into college, I mean, he actually resented the fact that they didn't tell him. So I'm wondering, I think you should look up and read a little bit more about what's the proper age. But I certainly think by the time that they're in middle school, they should understand something about what diagnosis they have. And it doesn't change them. I mean, they're going to be just as special to you, the day that they find out or the day after. But I think, you just have to make them feel like they are special, because they are.
Oh, I love that, Mom. I love you so much. That was really well said. They're the same. Exactly. People on the spectrum are the same person they were before and after the diagnosis. So always remember that. That's a great question that came in from somebody else who was talking about, and I apologize, I can't see. Oh, here we go, from Abigail. Hi, Abigail. Abigail, this is really just true. It's there are so many days where we have to understand that autism is not necessarily a race, it's a marathon. So really, when these questions do come up, look for a mentor. Laura just asked about coaching. And I'm happy to say that I just received my life coaching accreditation this year, which I'm really excited about, which gives me an opportunity to do more work in that realm. So please let me know how I can help. But the questions that you're bringing up here, will he drive? Will he be able to live on his own? Any advice on dealing with new questions that I never had before? Just take it in stride. Take it one day at a time, and just realize that, you're not alone. So many of us in this community ask ourselves these same questions all the time. A question that I continue to hear is even from like 5-6-year-old children's parents who say, what will happen to my child when I'm gone? Because it's a question that comes up, and it's something that we need to be prepared for, but we also need to live in the moment and embrace our child for who they are, and just help them as much as we can right now, as much as we look towards the future. Mom, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I certainly can understand Abigail's questions. I mean, when you were first diagnosed, you were seeing Dr. Margaret Herzig in New York, and I had almost the exact same conversation that Abigail had. I was like, will you be able to drive? What would your future be like? Would you have friends? And she turned around and said to me, she said, I think we should talk about what therapeutic nursery school we're going to get him in. And she stopped me in my tracks when I said it, because I was like, oh yeah, because you really can't really think and know the answers of what's going to happen 20 years down the line or 15 years down the line. the question about will they drive well if we ever get post-COVID, there's Uber now. So there's really, yes, they'll probably be able to drive with driving lessons, but if we ever get again post-COVID, the need to drive probably isn't really as important as it was once was. But I think for one thing, you said, well, what do I do if I have questions? Well, it seems like Kerry has networks that, like I think you have an ongoing support group, Kerry, where the woman, Abigail, could send in her questions, and, you usually stick with people. I mean, you've been with Jade in how many years now? She's 16. And how many, you've been with her and her family since she was 4 or 5. So, I mean, 10 years. So, I mean, there are people and resources out there to help you. I think you should make the list of the questions, now when he's 6. And you should, learn and ask other people who have children that are a little older. Well, what are they doing? But then I think you should just, keep in touch with groups that can help you focus on what can you do now, and what are you going to be able to do in 5 or 10 years.
I absolutely love that response. And we have another great comment that comes in, and this focuses more on adulthood, which I'm glad we're getting the opportunity to talk a little bit about tonight. I'm still looking for that special somebody. And Sierra writes, hi, Sierra, dating. How do you trust the person without taking advantage? Now, Sierra, there's just a lot of gray area when it comes to dating. Obviously, we know this regardless if you're autistic or neurotypical. The most important thing that I continue to tell my mentees when they're trying to go on dates is to make sure you're listening. Because at the end of the day, one thing that people continue to talk about is the importance of open communication. And one of the best ways to be open with somebody else is to not only ask them questions, but also to be an ear. Just make sure you also realize that sometimes your partner might not necessarily want to talk about the same topic for 95% of the time, and make yourself a well-rounded individual who has several key interests, not only one key interest, to make sure that there are common interests that you potentially can have with your partner. I think it's really, really important. I also have a book called Autism and Falling in Love, which is available on my website, kerrymagro.com/store. So I would definitely check that out as a resource if you want to learn a little bit more about dating, especially in the autism community. Mom, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
You don't tell me who you're dating, so I don't know. Can't answer that question.
Oh goodness. Yeah, I'm currently not dating during the age of COVID-19, but I'm hoping to at some point. I've gone on a few virtual dates, which has been a very interesting experience. But hopefully once we get the vaccine and things go back to a little bit more normal, I'll be able to look at that. Because I mean, one of my big goals as I get older is to raise a family. So that would be something that would really mean a lot to me. We have a lot of comments that are coming in, Mom, by the way, saying how awesome you are. Just like Tara writes, you have a great mom. There are a few more that have popped up as we're going along. Emily writes, is it possible to join the support group? Yes. So, Emily, it's actually at my Facebook page. If you go to Carrie's Autism Journey on Facebook and you scroll down, you're going to see a link that says Carrie's Autism Village. And that's where I post all of my webinars on things such as picky eating, toilet training, et cetera, and so forth. So if you join that group, that's where I received a few questions for tonight's Facebook Live, in addition to just answering questions from people in our autism community. So I definitely check it out. It's Carrie's Autism Village, and it's available to look at Carrie's Autism Journey. So in the spirit of time, we'll try to get to 2 more questions. And then for anyone at home, check out the comments if we didn't get to your question. In addition to that, if With end of the year, we would love if you would consider making a donation to support our initiatives, such as our video series, because this year has been so tough on so many of us in the nonprofit world. So if you would like to make an end of the year tax deductible gift, you can go to the link kfmmakingadifference.org/donate. So, this actually hasn't come up yet. So Rachel writes, and she says, I'm sure this has been answered, but when did you start talking? So we believe, I started talking when I was about 2.5 years old, give or take a few months in between. And I started speaking in complete sentences when I was about 7. But my mom is part of several support groups, and one of the support groups today, she wrote a really nice answer to one of these autism moms' questions about my speech. Mom, do you want to share a little bit about just what that comment was, or just even a little bit about when I started speaking for the first time?
Yeah, well, let me go back, because now I remember what I wrote today. A parent had come on and said something about her, I think her son is, I don't know if her son's 2 or older than 2, but she said that she was asking the group, since her son only has really sounds, what was the prospects that he would speak. So she was asking people's experiences on what had happened. And I think she put this post up maybe a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know, I just saw it today. So I said when, and some of the parents who answered said, that their children had started to speak at 7. There were varying comments in there. And so what I said was that I found that the fact that her child was making sounds, that they're laughing and there were sounds, I said that normally is it's a good sign. It's a hopeful sign, but you have to just kind of like wait and see. And I said, in your situation, you babbled, you certainly giggled, and you laughed at bubbles and things like that, but you really didn't have words. And then you did have a couple words. You had like juice, or you had a few words. And then what I found out was that you had really no words. I mean, it was just nothing else. There was no progress. It was just a few little words that were in there. And then all of a sudden, after a very long period of time, it was months, you started to have words, like 3-letter words, 4-letter words, but there were words. And then it seemed like it just very quickly, more and more words came out. And I felt as if those words were stuck in you, and that once the dam broke, or once the cork popped, the words came out. Now, you still had expressive and receptive language disorder, which means you could understand what people were saying to you, but you couldn't really get the words out to respond. And that's when you say you spoke in complete sentences at 7. That's probably true, but you certainly were communicating before that. And so, I think it, forgot the question. What was her question?
The question is, when did I start talking for the first time, and what were some of the biggest things to encourage my speech?
Well, I'm not sure what was encouraging the speech. I will tell you that when we went away we have a house in Vermont, and when we went away in the summer, between 4 and 5 and 6, I always had Hooked on Phonics with me. I bought Hooked on Phonics, and we would it was repetition. We would go from page to page, and the reward then was a sticker, and you like stickers. So, we were definitely working, we were working 24/7, every day of the week we were working, working on speech and working on playing speech. But we've also, Carrie and I have realized that I actually have some books that I recently found where and I will go through it and look at it again, where I was so impressed that he started to speak. I wrote down every word and every half word that he said. So I do have pages of words of that once they started to come out, what they were. And I would say, this is my first Facebook Live, but I'd be willing to do this again, Carrie. If I know we're not going to get to all the questions tonight, but if you had time, I certainly would be willing to do this. If you could set something up again for the people who don't get their questions answered tonight, we could do it again if you had time.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that. And again, this is just one of the many Facebook Lives we do. We've highlighted self-advocates and other individuals within our autism community, and we never got to interview my mom. So I figured this might be a nice end of the year treat for so many people who follow our Facebook page and our nonprofit and support everything that we're doing as part of our nonprofit organization. So we'll do one more question. And then again, for anyone who has any follow-up questions, feel free to write it in the form in the comments, just at bit.ly question, ask Carrie, and we'll try to get to it. This question is great because it's part of our nonprofit. Our nonprofit actually gives scholarships for students with autism to go to college. We have a scholarship program called the Making a Difference for Autism Scholarship. And in the past 8 years, we've given out 86 scholarships for students with autism to go to college. So this is a big topic. I'm also writing a book post-COVID. I hope to get out on the college experience for those on the autism spectrum. So I would definitely check that out. And Luana writes, hi Luana, that's a very pretty name. What did your transition to college, university look like? What came easy? What was difficult? How did it look different versus high school once an IEP is no longer part of the formula of success? Yeah, so Luana, I have a keynote that I give. My full-time job is public speaking. It's called Dude, Where's My IEP? Because I really never received any form of transitional services to make me understand the differences between IEP to 504 reasonable accommodations. As mandated as part of an IEP, you need to have some form of transitional planning in high school for somebody who's on the autism spectrum. So I definitely recommend talking to, if you're a parent, talking to your child's study team about what the transition plan looks like, because it's supposed to break down things such as if post-secondary is a possibility, if housing for those with high support needs, and then also employment and how we're going about our high school experiences in terms of accommodations to get our loved ones to that point. So definitely important to talk to your child's study team when it comes to that. Mom, was there anything in particular that you think helped me during that transition time?
I think you know so much about this topic. I think maybe you're giving the real overview, where I think the person is looking more to ask you like what challenges you had. Well, Carrie went to school went to community high school in Teaneck, New Jersey, which had 160 kids. It was a special school, which he went into after he left the public schools, and he applied to and was accepted to Stillman School of Business on Seton Hall, which is in New Jersey. They must have 10,000 kids, and he chose to live on campus. And I remember saying to everybody, he had never even ridden a bus by himself. I mean, he basically was driven everywhere. He went to school in Teaneck, which was like 40 miles from Jersey City. So he really never even had an experience of, maybe other kids who had, been bused or took buses. And so the concept for the parent, us, of sending him off to college and letting him live in a dorm, on his own was pretty daunting. But I would have to say that he probably matured there better, and probably the reason he's so successful today is because of the experiences he had there. But when he did go there, I do believe that living on campus is a very good experience for anybody's kids, and certainly kids with autism. But they have to go with a support group because, as Carrie said, there's no IEP, so you now have a 504 plan, and you have to. I think Carrie's success in the first year the first year was basically because he was positioned to be in groups. He was in a leadership program that they did everything in groups, 15 members of a group. And he joined, Carrie, you can talk about some of the things you joined, but I don't think he would have ever survived academically if he had not really had a few support groups that he was kind of tied to going. Because I've spoken to a number of parents who the kids go off to college who are on the spectrum, and without some sort of support or just even a buddy or a friend or somebody that they know. Carrie talks about mentorship, peer mentoring on campus, which is very important, but it would be very daunting just to send your child off to, live on campus without knowing that there was some support groups, not groups, but, some support system for them in place. And Carrie, I think you could talk more to what happened at Seton Hall.
What happened at Seton Hall was, I really, like my mom mentioned, I really took the bull by the horns, and I tried to join as many. I was one of the only kids from my high school going to Seton Hall, so I knew I was going in knowing nobody. So I really took the time to, first off, take less classes for my first semester. I only took 4 classes, so I took the lowest amount of credits I could to have full time standing at the university. So that was a big thing. It made me focus a lot more on just trying to be social and get myself adjusted. I was also living in the dorms for the first time, so that was a big transition as well. One that, if you're not necessarily far away from campus, is something you may want to consider not doing, at least initially. I mean, again, it is a very wide spectrum, but if you're living at home for the first time, it might make it a little bit easier to not, and being able to live at home for a little bit as well. So I really hope that these answering these questions from my wonderful mom helped. Like she mentioned, she's definitely game to come back for future Facebook Lives. Mom, is there any final thoughts you would like to leave for people at home to know a little bit just about my journey on the autism spectrum?
I'd like to go back just on the college question just for a second, because if anybody is in a situation where they are approaching the decision to go to colleges, we know of some really good colleges which have programs that really, where the administration really, and the support services, I think it's TCNJ of New Jersey, but there are, if you're thinking of going to college, check it out. Check out schools that actually have programs that have been successful, because there are really a lot. And Carrie's right. You don't have to go live on campus to go to college. You could certainly live home and make it a meaningful experience. I don't really know what else to say about your journey. All I know is that we're going into a new year tomorrow, and it's been a very rough year, I think, for everyone. World's been turned upside down, and the fact that you can actually be on with parents tonight, and to try to kind of continue the normalcy that we are sitting here talking about 6-year-olds and what they're doing, and 18-year-olds and what they're doing, and it kind of says something a little bit different, I think, than when we were in April, when we didn't know if we'd ever go out of the house again, or if there ever would be, a time where anybody would think about maybe going back to school next year, or the normal things, normalcy. So hopefully the vaccine is coming, and we're all going to be able to focus. And I congratulate you, though, Carrie, because I know, you went from being home 1 week a month to having the entire speaking tour that you were on canceled, basically, and you just adjusted, and you've been doing things virtually. And I think that's, you've been making the best of a bad situation. And I have to say that that's probably some of the splinter skills that you've learned dealing with your diagnosis all of these years, that, you kind of punt, bend and punt, and if you can't do it one way, you'll find another way to do it. And I hope that's what all the kids of the parents that are on this Facebook Live tonight will be able to do for their children, and you'll be around to help them. So they'll.
Absolutely. And just for everyone who knows, I've been public speaking for 10 years, and my nonprofit, but so many of our nonprofits have been hit hard this year due to COVID-19, especially less people willing to donate. And don't get me wrong, I know that a lot of us are money pinching right now. But if any of you would like to consider making an end of the year donation to support our video series, we have given out 86 scholarships to students with autism go to college. While my mom was talking, I went to our email and I saw one donation come in already, which we really, really appreciate, to continue to support our initiatives, such as our video series, our nonprofit, as well. So I thank you all so much for taking some time out right before the new year. I want to thank my wonderful mom, who I love so much, for joining me for her first ever Facebook Live to answer your questions. I often say it takes a village, so I was really glad to have a parent perspective, along with my own self as an autistic self-advocate, able to talk to all of you tonight. If we didn't get to your question, again, please go to the link bit.ly/question for Carrie, and we'll try to answer that. And thank you all so much for jumping on, and cheers and Happy New Year's for a wonderful 2021. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.